The Man Everybody Was Afraid of, a Dave Brandstetter mystery. Book 4 in the series. Author Joseph Hansen. Publisher Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 9. Tired plumbing made the flimsy house shudder. Behind her, somewhere, there was the hard tumble of water into a bathtub. She was tall bones inside a housecoat faded from many washings. Above high, broad cheekbones, her eyes tilted. Their whites were stained like old porcelain. Her hair was streaked with gray, but he doubted she was 50. She kept the screen door hooked between them. How could he be here? They sent him to prison 2 years ago. It was a mistake. Lester wouldn't do anything outside the law. Last thing he would touch is marijuana. Some other boy must have got the wrong motorcycle in the dark. Then the police stopped Lester. He's been out of prison since the 16th, Dave said. His parole officer told me he was living here. Aren't those his clothes piled up on your washing machine? Those are Bernard Stein's clothes, she said. His mama and papa are on an Arctic cruise. I look after their house. Bernard didn't come to me with those till I was set to go home. I brought him along to wash up here for him. Lester owed you a lot, Dave said. It doesn't seem right, his not coming straight home to you. At least he could have telephoned. He telephoned to Nita Orton. I don't have a telephone, she said. I can't afford it. Who is Nita Orton? She drove him to his parole officers, Dave said. And then she drove him here, didn't she? I don't know any Anita Horton, Ophelia Green said. You'll have to go now. My tub will run over. She shut the wooden door with its neatly curtained, cracked glass pane. The sagging boards of the stoop under his feet shook to her retreating steps. He raised knuckles to knock again, heard a car coming in low gear up the steep road, and turned. Through drooping pepper tree branches, he saw the car slow at the crooked gate and the gap-toothed white lath fence, where red geraniums flared. The car was a pale lavender Montego. The driver, peering anxiously at Ophelia Green shack out of round, dull baby eyes, was Louise Orton. She saw Dave. The car bucked. Its tires squealed. It roared off up the hill. He turned back and rapped the door hard. The plumbing quit its noise. Footsteps thumped. Ophelia Green yanked open the inner door. I don't know why you keep bothering me. I wouldn't if you told the truth, Dave said. You know Anita Orton. She and Lester kept company back before he went to jail. At school and here in La Calita, too. Didn't Lester tell you? They were going to get married. She clutched the housecoat at her throat. No, she said. He's too young. He had to get his schooling. All right, Dave said. Maybe not. Maybe he was afraid of how you'd react. Anita wasn't that smart. Or maybe she simply had different motives. She told her father. He didn't like it. One way he showed that was to erase her name from his insurance policy. The other way he showed it, I think you know. You tell me. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. I wish you'd leave me alone. I work hard. I don't know why anymore. Once I had Lester to work for, hope for. That's all past now. They'll never let some boy that's been a convict be a lawyer. No black boy. Her laugh was brief and bleak. What a fool I was to think he'd ever have a chance, to think bringing him up here to raise him would keep him out of trouble. It was a safe bet, Dave said. There are no safe bets, she said. Not if you're black. Go away now. I'm tired. I want my bath. I want my supper, and I want to sit and look at the TV till I fall asleep. Is that so much to ask for? I get up every morning at 5 o'clock. Mrs. Green, you know it wasn't some other boy who taped that marijuana under the fender of your son's motorcycle? Lester never told you that. Well, it wasn't Lester, she said. That's right. But he knew who it was, and so do you. You must be aching to tell somebody after 2 long years. She drew a breath, opened her mouth, shut it again. She shook her head. I don't know what you're talking about. Dave sighed. Next door, the goat bleated up the canyon. Small birds squabble in the old trees. The hills cut off the drooping sun. Down here in the shadows, it was turning chilly. He read his watch. Amanda would be giving up on his call. Maybe his father was conscious, able to talk to him. Would he ever know? He looked at the worn black face on the other side of the screen door. Why should you be afraid of him now? He's dead. Who says I'm afraid? Afraid of who? The big man with the badge and gun who sent Lester to prison and came here a week ago, Saturday, looking for him, on a far more serious charge than possession of marijuana. You told him what you told me, that Lester wasn't here, and before he could find him, he was murdered. Murdered? You talking about Police Chief Orton? Is that the Orton you mean? His daughter? Orphelia Green tried for a disbelieving laugh, but her eyes showed fear. Big, rich people like that? What truck would they have with us? What serious charge? He got a letter, the kind clipped out of magazines and pasted on the page. He didn't like it, didn't believe it. It said someone had his daughter and wanted $25,000 for her safe return. He went to Sangre de Cristo to find her. She wasn't there. But her roommate told him about a telephone call she'd had just before she left from a boy. For some reason, he wondered if that boy had sounded like a Negro. For the same reason he came here, didn't he? The charge was kidnapping. Maybe it was the dying light, but he didn't think so. She'd gone a sick, ashy color. She turned away her head and groaned. Her hand groped out for the screen door hook and pried it open. Almost inaudibly, she said, You better come in. He went in. The room still held the heat it had baked in all day. She dropped into an overstuffed chair that was covered by a threadbare flower print. It faced a television set whose plastic case had split and curled. At the ends of the bloated chair arms, her hands hung bony, her head drooped. She moved it from side to side. I knew it. Just knew it. I should have locked this place up and gone to my sister-in-law in L.A., Thelma. Be no hardship for her. She's a surgical nurse. I shouldn't have listened. To Mrs. Orton, you mean? She said there wouldn't be any trouble, now that he was dead, now that they had that crazy man locked up for killing him. Nobody else alive knew about that letter, only her and me, but life's not like that. I knew you'd come along. Not who you'd be, just that you had to be. How'd you know about the letter? Dave glanced around the neat, discouraged room. A raffia wastebasket unraveled in a corner. Curled magazine stuck out of it. Did Lester paste it up here? I told you I haven't seen him, she cried. Anyway, he'd never do such a thing. Ben Orton had taken 2 years of his life. He destroyed his future. Becoming a lawyer meant a lot to him. Why wouldn't he want revenge? All black people are not savages, she said. Black people were building this country before people with names like yours ever stepped off the boat. Right, Dave said. But you don't know whether he pasted up that letter or not. Do you? You weren't here. You were out working. Only way he'd do that was if she made him, Ophelia Green said. He didn't hate Ben Orton or anybody. Hate you can't live with. I taught him that from a baby. Hate you can only die with. But nobody taught her, and she did hate him for everything he ever gave her, and he gave her everything. Except Lester, Dave said. Ophelia Green made a scornful sound. She never wanted Lester. He wanted her, but she was just using him to make her daddy mad, to see how far she could stretch his love. Money and cars, clothes, vacations. Those were easy for him. He'd always give her what he wanted. She had to make him give her something he didn't want. But you don't know her, Dave said. Ophelia Green gave him a shamed half smile. She lifted and dropped a hand. I've known that child since she was 3-4 years old. I worked for them then. I had to take Lester with me. There was nobody to leave him with. He was always a good boy, played with clothespins and things. Quiet in the kitchen, kept out of the way. But she wouldn't let him alone, and she wouldn't play nice either. Always getting him in trouble, making him cry. Eve, Dave said. I didn't like to quit. Mrs. Orton was always very pleasant to me. Her husband didn't like the children playing together, but she thought it was sweet. I kept putting it off, but I knew in my heart was right, but I finally saw I had to leave there. She looked grim. Ought to have left the day I started. Lester was lost to her by then. Broke his heart. He cried and begged me to take him back. What about school? Dave asked. By then, she wouldn't look at him. Nothing so cruel as little children. I thought he'd died, but after a while it looked as if he'd forgotten her. Black, you get used to people treating you one way here and another way there. They don't mean anything by it. I taught him that. I thought it was over. His report cards were good. He had some little friends. He didn't brood anymore. She brooded, Dave said. Where was Jerry in all this? With his daddy. Always with his daddy, she said. I don't know how he's going to live without his daddy. Dave looked at his watch again. He went to the raffia basket and took out the magazines. He put on glasses. He doesn't know about that ransom note even now. Why not? Anita was making a fool of her daddy, Ophelia Green said. He didn't want the boy to see him made a fool of. Still a boy, is he? Dave said. They'd used a razor blade to cut out the words. The $25,000 had been a cake-baking prize offer. Safe was a paper diaper claim, and that's what Mrs. Orton told you. That Ben Orton thought the letter was only a hoax, a malicious joke. Oh, he was angry. He was after them, no telling what he'd have done. She came to clear them out of here if this was where they were hiding. Wanted them to go to Mexico and stay there till he got over how angry he was. But she didn't have any money. He never let her have any. It wouldn't have helped Lester. Dave put the glasses away. He had to report to his parole officer. Nothing can help Lester, Ophelia Green said darkly. He'll go back to jail, like you said, long years, and for what? For her. And she doesn't give a snap of her fingers for him. The stained eyes looked forlornly at Dave. He's got good sense, alone. He'd never step out of line. He knows the price. For blacks, it's always twice as high, but for her, if she say, do it, he does it. They were here, weren't they? Dave said. I guess so. Lester had his keys and his bed. She broke off and looked at the window where pepper tree shadows stitched dark lace on the white. I guess they were in his bed. Looked like it, but they were gone time I got home. Her eyes pleaded up at Dave. Chief Orton could have been wrong. The hope in her voice was frail. Somebody else could have sent that letter. Dave laid the magazine in her lap. She touched the clipped places, studied them in the poor light. Yes, she said. All right. And there were tears on her face when she turned it up to him this time. But it wasn't meant. It was just a game, was all it was. Children. A game. That everybody lost, Dave said. At the Geranium Gate, he heard the whirring noise again from across the road. The land fell off there, and among ragged weeds, crumbling foundation brick showed red, where another house had once stood. Crossing, he glanced up the road. No sign of the Lavender Montego, but at the nearest bend, a Ford van was parked. He'd seen it somewhere this morning. Then, when he'd left Richard Knowles half an hour ago, hadn't it been among the other cars parked at the top of the road? Frowning to himself, he crunched rubble underfoot between the foundation bricks. But the whirring had stopped. There was a shed that had been left standing when the house had come down. He edged among the bristly stalks of heavy-headed sunflowers. The padlock on the shed door had rusted and fallen loose, but something held the door. He peered through weathered siding. There were lumpy shapes within, but nothing that moved. He walked around to the back of the shed and squinted in again. He didn't learn anything. He turned. Below, a barranca was thick with creepers. Wild cucumber, honeysuckle, morning glory in the deepening shadows. White flowers showed ghost faces, and there was the glint of bright metal. He looked up. The sky still held a lot of daylight. He started down, careful of his footing. The bank was steep, and he kept having to stop and rip loops of vine from around his ankles. He lost sight of the bright metal. He leaned left, leaned right, narrowing his eyes. Was it glass he saw now? He dropped quickly, stumbling, nearly falling to the bottom of the barranca, where vines were heaped chin high. He plunged fingers into the top of the mound and yanked. A thick and heavy mat came away. Beneath was a small car, bright green, brand new. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.